Welcome back, everyone. How are you all doing today? I know it's been a long time since we've had a video out, any discussion video out, really. Well, we have more things coming down the pipeline. I have a lot of projects that have been going on. I just needed to take a bit of a break. And then when I was going to come back, I ended up getting a summer cold, which did not help anything at all. So, here we are. And today we're having a discussion video. And that discussion is going to be on the Singularity. He's been the subject of many discussions from many different content creators recently, but let's just get into this hot mess. All right, here we go. All right, I've been trying to keep this really short, but there's no real short way to go about this, but we're going to try to shorten this as much as possible. We're going to make this as concise as possible. So let's get into this. First of all, contrary to what Otts and Scott Jund are saying, no, the Singularity is not secretly a strong killer. And if he is secretly a strong killer, it's a secret even to the Singularity. The Singularity is just bad. He is an awful killer to play as. He is by far easily the absolute worst killer in the game. The worst killer ever released in Dead by Daylight history. And I mean, we're talking, remember, for those of you who might remember this, there was a time where Trapper's traps could all be broken and Trapper could be left without a power. There was a time when Freddy took 7 seconds without add-ons, 5 seconds with an add-on, whippy, to be able to interact with survivors. That meant if you walked up to a survivor who was on a generator, they could sit there on a generator, all happy-go-lucky, and they could just continue working on a generator in your face, and you wouldn't be able to grab them, you wouldn't be able to hit them, you couldn't stop them. All you could do is sit there looking at them, which is essentially what the Singularity's power is. The Singularity's power is the power of voyeurism. Instead of standing over someone's shoulder and staring at them for 7 seconds like old Freddy did, you get to watch them through a camera, longingly, while they do generators in your face. That's the Singularity's power in a nutshell. Oh, I'm sorry, I mentioned the benefit of it being a staticky camera, or a distorted camera. But that's the thing. On paper, Singularity's power sounds really cool, sounds really balanced, and everything else like that. But like everything on paper, Singularity's power is entirely theoretical. And the thing is, it's not a matter of survivors denying the Singularity having a power. No. It's so, in its current state, it's so easy to get EMPs, and they're so available, and especially because all you have to do is sit at the beginning of a match and interact with that box, push those buttons, and you can have yourself an EMP within 20 seconds. Not the whole 90 seconds that everyone tries to sell it off as. Oh, you have a good early game. Like, no, you sit there, you push the buttons on the box, you get your EMP early, and then you're good to go. And you either jump on a generator or you sit there at the same box and you print another EMP so it's available when you want it. That's the thing with his power. It's not that survivors deny you having a power. It's that if they choose not to do that at the beginning of a match, they're allowing you, they are permitting you as the killer to have a power. And even then, the power's not all that good. It's the power of catching up and staying on top of survivors, but it doesn't really have that much of a meaningful impact. Sure, it's okay with creating dead zones by allowing you to break pallets faster or auto-break pallets, but the distance that survivors get after every teleport is almost akin to just hitting the survivor outright, without the benefit, of course, of hitting the survivor. So all you're going to be doing, quite literally, is playing catch-up all match long. Which might be a scary thing until you realize that's all you're doing, is just playing catch-up. By the time you break a pallet, even with this power, by the time you break a pallet or vault that window and start catching up to a survivor with your overclock, and your overclock runs out, by the time you've caught up to that survivor, they've made it to another pallet or another window, and you'll begin to realize just how many pallets and windows there are on a map when you really play this killer, because that's all he does is, along with the survivors, bounce from pallet to window to pallet to pallet to window to pallet until they run out of pallets to bounce to, and then you can finally get a hit. But ask anyone who's played killer long enough and they'll tell you that if you spend your entire match or your early match just creating a dead zone by chasing one or maybe two survivors, or even trying to juggle survivors, and that's all you're doing is creating dead zones and you're not actually making any headway, you're just going to lose. You might delay the match from being a 3 to 4 minute match to being a 4 to 5 minute match. Woo! But you're not actually going to have any meaningful impact. You're not going to be able to do much of anything at all. And that is a problem. Like, this killer is, in its current state, by far the weakest killer. I mean, there are ways to play him where you can get a 4K. I've done it. I've done it on the game. And I find that that's his strongest map. I'll agree with Scott Jund here. He is entirely map dependent. He basically needs tiny maps with areas that face the center of the map that force survivors to run through that middle area of the map in order to be able to have an impact on his power, because you could swap to a camera that's nearby or always nearby. But even then, you might be denied a power, and even then, as the killer, you're entirely dependent on running Brutal Strength and Bamboozle, so that way when you don't have a power, you kind of have your power, because that's essentially what his power is just having Brutal Strength and Bamboozle. He's an awful, awful killer. He's just bully fodder, and that's all it is. You're just asking for survivors to abuse you, to antagonize you, to bully you at every loop, because you don't have any means of responding. You have no meaningful way of responding. And it's to the point where I would honestly go as far as saying that playing him willingly is tantamount to self-harm. Because that's all you're doing, is you are choosing to get yourself frustrated. You are choosing to subject yourself to antagonization. You are choosing to subject yourself to the abuses of the map, to survivors just bullying you. You're choosing to subject yourself to all of that just by picking this killer. He is that bad, and I would not recommend anyone playing him at all. But Behavior recently came out with a whole list of buffs for this killer, and they're going to try to make him better. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to reduce the number of EMP boxes from 5 to 4. Was originally 7 on in the PTB, but that's down half. That's down half, and I still don't think that's going to have much of an impact. They're going to increase the amount of time it takes to automatically print an EMP from 90 seconds to 100 seconds. Whoopee! I can still print one manually for between 20 and 30 seconds. Not going to have that big of an impact, because smart survivors will go to the box, interact with the box, and get one in their hand before allowing them to automatically print on their own. So survivors are still going to have them within the first 30 seconds of a match, which isn't going to be any good. That's just not going to be any good. And then they're going to have survivors suffering a 10% slowdown while they're using the EMP, which takes 2.5 seconds to charge. So that's a 2.5 seconds of having a 10% slowdown, which is not going to be impactful, because survivors are just going to do it on the other side of a safe pallet, which there are far too many of in this game, or they're going to do it on the other side of a safe window, which again there are far too many of. And players are going to see that more and more and more. So it's going to be entirely RNG dependent, which goes back to the whole thing that Scott said about him being map dependent. He's going to be map dependent, all right, but it's going to be map dependent on the RNG of the map rather than the actual map itself, because this killer is just terrible. So even his new buffs aren't going to have any real meaningful effects, because what's going to happen, it's going to take a moment for survivors to figure this out. Solo survivors, new solo players, he's actually going to be good at beating. His new changes will make him good against newbie solo players. It's not going to change how he plays against squads. Squads are just going to stomp him all over the place, and any solo players who are good at the game, who have been around the game long enough, they're going to know, grab an EMP, and if someone else is in chase, run up and use the big EMP range to help them get the slipstream off, so that way, once again, the killer has no power. So effectively, this killer, if he has a power, it's the power of catching up, but when he doesn't have a power, which is often, he just doesn't have a power. He doesn't have a power. What I would have done to buff this killer, because this is how you actually make this killer effective. The cameras putting slipstream on survivors, make that an automatic thing. increase the range, the effective range of each camera from 6 meters to about 12 meters, maybe 18 meters, but I think 12 meters is pretty fair in that regard. But you increase that range to about 12 meters, and anyone within that 12 meter range will start being targeted by the cameras automatically. You do that, and that's going to make things so much easier, because now this killer, like, this is one of the worst things about this killer, and this is why, like, especially for anyone who says, oh, he's so good in chase, he uses power in chase. No, he isn't. You set up his power, you're in chase, you're setting up his power, you have to stop what you're doing to stare at the survivors through a camera. And granted, it's just a few seconds, but that's a few seconds that they can get away. You might be able to slipstream, but now you're only using his power to ever catch up, and that's assuming you can hit the survivor because of the way they are able to run. Instead, set up a camera, let it automatically place it on the survivor. Knock off a little bit of time that it takes for him to come out of his power, not too much, but enough that it's effective, so that way survivors aren't guaranteed to make it to the next pallet or the next window, but that it'll be a close call. And you do that, he'll be a lot more effective, especially because EMPs are so readily available. The other thing you could do to help make this killer more viable is allow him to actually slipstream survivors himself manually. And by that, I mean just use his arm cannon to put the slipstream on a survivor. You do that, and then the next shot will allow you to teleport to him. I mean, there's a limited range at which you can even use his cannon in chase on survivors. So, I mean, why not do that? The fact that people can deny him his power, and that he has to stop whatever he's doing, drop what he's doing, to then look at people through a camera, to then apply his power to them, and then go back into himself, and then have to re-find that survivor who just ran away from that camera, to then teleport to them. It's just an awful feeling. Like, allow him to manually place it. That'll make the frequency and availability of EMPs seem more meaningful. It'll make his power have some impact, because survivors will still be able to defend themselves, but now they're going to have to choose when they use their EMP, not just which EMP they're going to use at that given moment. Am I going to use the red one or the blue one today? I don't know. Which one's more fashionable to use in order? I mean, really, that's what it comes down to with survivors using EMPs with this power. It's just which EMP is their favorite one they want to use first. And I know that's a joke because they can only carry one EMP at one time, but the point still remains is that survivors have far too much power over the Singularity's power. But at least allowing him to manually place it on survivors would give him the power back. It wouldn't make him overpowered. It would just mean that survivors would have to be tactical on when they choose to use an EMP, even if they can use it in chase, because the killer can also use his power in chase as well, which is not something that can easily happen. And I know there's some people who are going to try to tell you. I know Otts will try to tell you it. I know Scott Jund will try to tell you it, to use his power in chase. Oh, just use his power in chase. Don't buy into that. It's a lot of crap. That's all it is. This killer is just awful. He is just awful to play, awful to use, and his new buff isn't going to change much at all. It's going to go from him having no power most matches to him having an occasional power some matches. Woo! Anyways, that's going to do it for me. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I still got this cold going on. I can feel it in my throat. It's real uncomfortable right now. But I just wanted to get a video out discussing the Singularity and just how horrible he is to play. So, like I said, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out over on Twitter. Follow me on Twitch and whatnot. Hit that subscribe button down below. Really helps out the channel. And, yeah, you guys all have yourselves a wonderful day. I'll catch you all later. Bye.